Please welcome to the stage the moderator, Giacomo Persi Paoli.
Excellencies, distinguished delegates, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, good morning and a warm welcome to this session, whether you're following us here in the room or online. We're here today to discuss a topic that is both critical and too often overlooked: the security and resilience of subsea telecommunication cables. This hidden infrastructure carries over 99% of global intercontinental data, silently underpinning every facet of our digital world that we rely on. Yet, despite of their criticality, they remain largely out of sight and too often out of mind. My name is Giacomo Persi Paoli. I'm the head of the Security and Technology Program at the United Nations Institute for Disarmament Research, UNIDIR. And it is an honor to co-host this session in partnership with the government of Norway as part of this year's Internet Governance Forum. Recent incidents, whether accidental or deliberate, have underscored how vulnerable these lifelines, these digital lifelines, truly are. The growing intersection of geopolitical tensions, malicious cyber capabilities, and infrastructure fragility highlights a stark reality. The risks are no longer hypothetical. They're here and they're multiplying. This is why this session aspires to be more than a conversation. It aspires to serve as a call for governments, industry, and the wider multi-stakeholder community to come together and exchange best practices, strengthen cooperation, and build resilience into one of the most vital components of the global digital ecosystem. This session will unfold in two parts. We will begin with a high-level ministerial dialogue offering national perspectives on how countries are approaching the protection of subsea cables. Following that, we will turn to a multi-stakeholder panel of experts who will reflect on the evolving threat landscape and share actionable insights on how to secure subsea cable infrastructure. We're privileged to be joined by an exceptional group of leaders and practitioners from across sectors and regions. Their experience and ideas are vital as we chart a path forward, one that reflects both the complexity of today's challenges and the spirit of international cooperation that forums like IGF are designed to inspire. And now, without further ado, I have the honor of inviting here on stage Minister Kari Antung, Minister of Digitalization and Public Governance of Norway, Jarno Sirjala, Undersecretary of State for International Trade in Finland, Bosun Tijani, Minister of Communications, Innovation and Digital Economy of Nigeria, and Liisa Pakoska, Minister of Justice and Digital Affairs of Estonia. Please join me in a round of applause in welcoming them on stage. Thank you once again for taking the time to join us to discuss this very important topic today. And I would like to start with you, Minister Tung, and give you the floor and the opportunity to introduce the topic. Please.
Thank you, moderator. Good morning, everyone. It is a pleasure to be here together with you for this important session on the protection of subsea telecommunication cables. And thank you once again for being here. The underwater cables make up the foundation of the global internet infrastructure, enabling people, communities, and businesses to communicate, share, and innovate. The recent years' incidents with damages to subsea infrastructure have reminded us how important it is to increase the resilience of this critical infrastructure. We've seen the incident with the Nord Stream pipeline, damages to subsea cables in the Baltic Sea and in the Red Sea, and once again we see war raging on European soil. As more than 99% of the intercontinental data traffic is carried by subsea communication cables, have raised the awareness that we must better protect this critical infrastructure. Norway has intensified our efforts to increase the security of subsea cables. We are conducting service of subsea cables for detection and prevention of threats. We make use of innovative technologies to monitor the subsea cables, enable detection of threats and incidents, and quick notification and intervention. We are also establishing a close cooperation between the private sector and the civil and defense authorities. This way, we can combine and maximize the knowledge and strength of the civil and private sector and the defense sector in this important work. We have seen the importance of clarifying the roles and responsibilities of owners of subsea cables, civil authorities, and the defense sector. This experience from the Baltic Sea have shown us that such clarifications are needed for swift action when incidents occur. But there's no escaping that submarine cable infrastructure often go across both national borders and international waters. Therefore, it is crucial with both European and international cooperation to identify and implement effective security measures and the necessary regulatory framework. One good example of such cooperation was established in 2024 for the protection of critical subsea infrastructure in the North Sea between the North Sea countries, Belgium, the Netherlands, Germany, the UK, Denmark, and Norway. In May 2025, a similar cooperation was agreed on for protection of critical subsea infrastructure in the Baltic Sea with Denmark, Estonia, Finland, Germany, Iceland, Latvia, Lithuania, Poland, Sweden, EU, and Norway. We need a combination of national, regional, and international cooperation to achieve effective resilience measures and the necessary exchange of information about threats and sharing of best practice. Threats to subsea communication cables are not limited by national borders, so international cooperation is vital for protection of subsea cables, and together we can better advance new and innovative ways of securing these critical cables that the internet is fully depending on. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Minister Tang, for sharing these opening remarks and also for highlighting, among other things, the importance of cooperation, both between states and governments, but also public-private cooperation as a key enabler for the protection of subsea cables. And now I'd like to give the floor to János Riala, Under Secretary of State for International Trade, Finland. Please.
Thank you, and good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It's great to be here, and it's my great pleasure to provide some remarks on behalf of the Government of Finland on protection of subsea telecommunications cables. The fundamental change in our security environment has implications for safety and resilience of our critical digital infrastructure. As recent incidents at the Baltic Sea have demonstrated, we have a clear need to better protect our critical undersea infrastructure. Trust in the digital systems is necessary for sustainable, inclusive digital future. The security of data and digital infrastructure are key concerns for countries from both a national security and an economic standpoint. The security of digital systems and data increases trust, and trust adds to investments, welfare, and prosperity. Concerning the current threat landscape and our resilience, Finland has a long history of preparedness in all areas of life, including the telecommunication sector. For example, resilience requirements for public communications networks were deemed necessary several decades ago and have been developed over time as technologies and usage needs have changed. Comprehensive telecommunications legislation and extensive resilience requirements covering also submarine cables have been implemented in Finland's national telecommunications legislation. The NIS2 directive focused on enhancing cybersecurity across the EU was also transposed into national law in April 2025. One of the most important aspects of the telecommunications resilience is solid public-private partnership. Over the years, close cooperation between public authorities and private companies has been established in Finland. I would like to also underline the importance of international cooperations on the security and resilience of submarine cables. International cross-border cooperation plays an important role, for example, in terms of supervision, building new capabilities, and preventing disruptions. We encourage also other actors to engage in the international cooperation and partnership building on submarine cable resilience, including the multi-stakeholder community. NATO and EU have increased their resilience, response, and deterrence, which help us protect against all incidents, intentional or unintentional. Most recent example of this practical cooperation to protect critical undersea infrastructure, including submarine cables, is the recent Memorandum of Understanding which the Baltic Sea NATO allies and the EU have published in May 2025. Within International Telecommunications Union, ITU, we have endorsed the International Advisory Body Declaration on Submarine Cable Resilience adopted in February 2025 and look forward to engaging in the working groups. Pleased to see the co-chair of the advisory body, Honourable Minister Tijani, taking an active role on these issues. In addition, the EU Action Plan on Cable Security defines 4 objectives to address the challenges in the field of submarine cable resilience and security prevention, detection, response and repair, and deterrence. Finland endorses the actions and objectives defined in the action plan and is committed to them. Also, we are co-signatories of the New York Declaration on Submarine Cable Security. The declaration aims to encourage countries to promote the integrity, security, and accessibility of the submarine cable infrastructure, which is important for the digital economy and a prerequisite for the trusted connectivity. To conclude, our societies are increasingly dependent on reliable and secure digital connections that ensure free flow of information and support growth in the digital economy. Securing critical infrastructure is of primary importance for Finland. This is why we will intensify cooperation with like-minded countries and actors to strengthen the security of submarine cables. A lot of focus has been placed on using new technologies in protecting critical undersea infrastructure. We need a sense of urgency on this. We need to develop well-working mechanisms, the innovative and willing to experiment. With regard to submarine cables, we underline 3 areas with resilience as a priority: adequacy of repair capacity, material preparation, as well as infrastructure monitoring and sensing capabilities. So the momentum on submarine cable security is right now, and it is important to enhance international cooperation on this topic. The multi-stakeholder community should also have a more prominent role on discussions on submarine cable resilience, and I'm grateful for our Norwegian colleagues to place more attention to this topic. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Undersecretary Sirjala, for your remarks, for again stressing the importance of cooperation, both between states and within the multi-stakeholder community, but also for bringing to light the importance of trust and security as vehicles towards the resilience of digital information infrastructure. I'd like now to give the floor to Bosun Tijani, Minister of Communications, Innovation and Digital Economy of Nigeria. Please.
Thank you so much for the opportunity, and good morning, everyone. It's a privilege to, of course, be on this stage to contribute to this important conversation. One that is important not just because, of course, we all know that digital economy is now literally the backbone of every economy in the world, but the fact that submarine cables are not just technical assets. These are literally the most important critical infrastructure that we can think of in the world today. And I think when you compare it to many other critical infrastructure, I don't think attention is being given enough to actually how we protect it. And while we may be seeing more attention, I think we have to call out, in particular, the International Telecommunications Union, the ICPC, for the work they've done, but also the renewed focus on mobilizing actors and partnerships and collaboration to drive stronger attention on this cable. When you look at countries all over the world, and I can speak to Nigeria and, of course, a lot of other African countries, a lot of the long-age challenges that we face, we're seeing communications technologies as being one of the fastest ways in which we can address so many of these challenges. Whether you talk about quality education or being able to provide healthcare to literally everyone on our continent and in our countries, we see the role that digital technologies, connected technologies can actually play. We've seen the role of connected technologies in financial inclusion, for instance, which has changed the landscape significantly. I think the most popular ones will be what you have in M-Pesa in East Africa. How many people we've been able to now bring into the financial system because we have connected technologies. It's the same in my country as well, where financial technology solutions are now changing how we do things. And all these solutions will not be possible without the internet. I think the introductory remarks mentioned that 99% of the traffic that is actually carried on the internet is on subsea cables. So we can actually see why this is not just a technical asset, it is an important asset. That not only do we need to protect it, we also need to worry more about the broader resilience of this cable. Which is why, as a country, we're extremely excited to be participating in the international advisory body that ITU is put together. And this advisory body for us is not just another talk shop or opportunity to gather. It's not one where we're just talking about how do we come up with more laws to protect, but how do we also deploy for timely repair? Because sometimes the damages to the cable are not intentional. Natural disaster may also cause the destruction of these cables. How do we ensure that nations can timely come to the point where they can fix this cable? Because just a day or two or three of some of these cables being down can cause significant problems for economies. That's why we're extremely excited to be part of. The second thing that the advisory body it's about that we find extremely useful is also how do we ensure that we can mobilize people to think more of the protocols around and building of frameworks to improve the resilience around, which means in some countries you have only one cable. Can we have opportunity for countries to be connected to more than one cable? Right? This is also part of the framework that can improve the resilience within any country. In many countries, you have these cables. Of course, these cables are not cables that you deal with in silos. We have about 8 subsea cables in Nigeria, nearly all of them. I think all of them actually came through Portugal. And while coming through Portugal, they passes through so many other countries. So this is something that you have to do in collaboration with so many countries. So we're working on not just the repair, we're working also on ensuring that we can increase the resilience by ensuring countries have multiple access to it. We're also working on the diversity. Is there a need to even have more of these cables in the first place, not just the ones we have? Do we need to have more of the cables? And from that advisory body, as a country, we're now being inspired to set up a dedicated desk within our Communications Commission that is responsible for ensuring that the protocol within country is clear, but the clarity within country is also then translated to neighboring countries and partner countries, because you can't do this in silo. And that's one thing we extremely enjoy. The second thing is also the talent and the resources to be able to make these repairs when they happen. We've seen on the African continent a limited amount of ships that can quickly go and be deployed to help with the fixing. And you know, there's a limit to how much investment you can throw at it because it's not something that happens all the time as well. So it has to be an extremely calculated investment. What's the optimal way to do it? This is something we're thinking of. Another is talent. There's a need for talent, ubiquitous talent that can actually also support, whether it's in the maintenance or the repair of subsea cable. That's also something that Nigeria is also prioritizing as well. And by extension to subsea cable, we're then asking difficult questions even around fiber optic network as well, because that's what take the advantage of subsea cable to the people. And we need to think about when we're thinking the sustainability and resilience, we're now saying, can we be thinking of these things in conjunction, not just one in isolation, because one feeds into the other. So we're extremely happy to be part of this, and I think it's something we'll urge other partners to take seriously, that we don't just look at laws only to protect them, but we also look at how do we make them a lot more resilient as well.
Thank you, Mr. Tijani, for also highlighting how resilience is not just about protection, as you just mentioned. There are many other components. There is definitely the part of securing to protection, but there is also a very strong component that relates to redundancy, relates to mitigating and be able to react when incidents do occur. And also, thank you for highlighting how the work conducted under the ITU is helping driving change at the national and regional level, and being a representative of the UN, that's ultimately our best hope, is that through the work of these multilateral bodies we could actually impact and drive change at the national and regional level. So thank you for sharing your remarks. And last but of course not least, I would like to give the floor now to Liisa Pakosta, the Minister of Justice and Digital Affairs of Estonia. Please.
Thank you so much, and thank you for having me here. It's a great honor for Estonia to participate here. So I have, in a way, a possibility to summarize why we are talking about this topic now. It is the situation that has changed, at least around this region where we physically are now. Let us remember that it was 1884 when the Paris Convention of Undersea Telegraphic Cables was agreed. And this was already then because if the good countries established the undersea connections, there were at the next moment the bad guys who wanted to cut it down. So this is actually the situation where we are just now as well, within the broader geopolitical situation. What we see around this area where we're physically now, that the Russian shadow fleet is cutting down our connections. And it has been underlined several times already here how important these connections are for our people, for our security, for our economies, for our hospitals, for our transport, name only. Estonia is a fully digital state, so all our government services are digital. Attacked by cutting down the undersea communication cables is actually not only a hybrid threat to our country, but it is a very actual threat to our country services to be actually there for our citizens. So we have seen a dramatic rise of accidents, so-called accidents, during the full-scale war in Ukraine. And I fully agree with my colleague. Some of the incidents beforehand have been unintentional. But what we see now is that we see definitely the intentional cut down of the undersea cables. And the only way to handle this is to, I will put it very short, that the good guys from like-minded countries, from like-minded organizations, work together to stop the bad guys who want to take down the security of our people, who want to take down our hospital services, economy, transport, heating system, name only. So this is the actual question we are discussing now, what we can do together in order to beat the bad guys who want to harm us.
Thank you, Mr. Pacosta, for sharing your perspective. And Estonia, in fact, has been a champion of driving digital transformation for many years. So thank you so much for sharing your perspective. We still have a couple of minutes before we wrap up this first part of the panel. So I wanted to give all of you the opportunity, if you wanted to add anything to your remarks or to react to anything that you have heard from your colleagues. This would be a good moment. We do have a couple of minutes left. Please.
Thank you, moderator. I think the panel has shown that we are completely dependent on the submarine cables, our society, our digital society, for healthcare services, education, transport system, and so forth. So being able to work together, both multilateral, but also multi-stakeholder, since many of these cables also are non-governmental and so forth, it's important to bring the different actors together and to discuss how we can make them more resilient so that we keep connected both to society but also internationally.
Thank you. Please.
I think the point I'd love to add is that building resiliency into subsea cable shouldn't be afterthought. I think for a long time, this is a cable that we've dumped there, and we've concluded that the risk to them is not severe. And as we're saying, both intentional and unintentional risk to them will become severe. And because of their critical nature, I think resilience should be intentional. It shouldn't be something that is afterthought. And what got me extremely passionate about this as a minister was when the cable cut in the West African region happened last year in March. And I saw firsthand the impact on society because we're all working daily to move literally everything online. And if we're moving everything online, if the backbone to this is at risk, it is a big challenge. And I was surprised at how, of course, we were fortunate, the private sector, because a lot of these cables are owned by private companies. The private sector came together. But as a minister, I didn't have any answer to give to people. And people don't often complain about companies when you have natural disaster. It's the government that they look to for answer. And that's why I think the work of the advisory board, the fact that ITU is prioritizing this, is extremely important. I don't think it's something we should push away. Some countries, some regions have the expertise, the framework, the know-how to be able to address this. You'll be surprised at how many countries and regions in the world have no clue where to start from. So even having things like regional redundancy protocol, I think is something we should mainstream more. We saw the minister talked about the one in the Baltic region, and but there are so many other parts of the world without this understanding. So we should collaborate more, share more, and ensure that collectively we can actually protect this critical infrastructure.
Thank you. Please.
Thank you very much for underlining this, because this is absolutely essential. We know sea as for ages connecting the whole world, not just regions. That is the fantastic part of sea. And also not only the ferries, but also the undersea cables that we now know as technological possibility. And this is nothing we can do alone, so to protect them. So I think Norway has put it very well and very timely, this topic here on the agenda, because really it is a global issue. Although we have some local issues, but in general what we need is a very clear universal set of rules to protect our citizens in all the continents. That is absolutely what we need.
Thank you. Please.
Yeah, I think it's very easy to echo what has been said about the international cooperation and the meaning of that, because we are in a different kind of situations, and there are different lessons there to be shared. And of course, I mean, when we talk about telecommunications or communication cables in general, so that's only part of the issues, what is there lying beneath the waves. And in Finland, so we have for a long time, decades already, we have applied this kind of model of comprehensive security. So these are also things that you have to connect to the other areas. So how to keep the society keeping during a peace or time of peace or during time of crisis, but you have to have a holistic understanding what is it all about.
Thank you very much. As the screens in front of us are suggesting, we have come up to time for this first part of the panel. I would like to sincerely thank you for taking the time to share your experience and expertise with us, with the audience here in the room and online. And I do invite our audience to join me in a round of applause for Minister Tung, Undersecretary Siriala, Minister Tijani, and Minister Pacosta. Thank you very much. Thank you so much. As we reconfigure the stage for the next part of the panel, I do invite you to watch a very interesting video on a specific application of a subsea cable technology, distributed acoustic sensing. And in the meantime, we'll prepare for the continuation of the panel. So over to the screen.
We can turn the ocean transparent and monitor whales by using distributed acoustic sensing. We have a network of fiber optic cables covering the world. Distributed acoustic sensing works by turning these cables into very long lines of virtual hydrophones. To record this data, one injects light pulses into a fiber cable. Some light is scattered back from impurities in the fiber and can be received by a DAS interrogator. Acoustic sources, such as whales, radiate oscillating pressure fields that stretch and compress the fiber. Variations in backscattered light tell us about the acoustic pressure fields at different points along the cable. This means that we can listen to the ocean at many separate points, creating tens of thousands of virtual hydrophones. This data is available immediately ashore at the end of the cable. Distributed acoustic sensing can revolutionize the way we understand and listen to the ocean, but we can go further than that. We can understand mechanisms of earthquakes, risks of landslides, avalanches, floods. For the ocean, we already have more than 1 million kilometers of fiber optic cables. What if we can use this as a global monitoring system?
I'm now very happy to introduce the next set of speakers on stage. This distinguished panel of experts comprising representatives from government, industry, academia, and civil society will really help us unpack different perspectives on the evolving threat landscape, as well as on actionable measures to protect subsea cable infrastructure. And we just heard through the remarks of all of the four ministers that preceded this panel how multi-stakeholder cooperation is indeed a key component to building resilience. Over the next hour or so, the panel discussion will focus on four key components. First, we will look at the current and emerging threat landscape. We will also try to unpack what are some of the vulnerabilities in the digital systems that monitor, manage, and secure subsea cable networks. We will be diving deeper into applicable international law, voluntary norms, and emerging best practices relevant to subsea cable protection. And last but not least, we will try at least our best to come up with some recommendations for strengthening subsea cable security through technical policy and legal mechanism, including the role of public-private partnership. And now, with further ado, I have the pleasure of inviting to join me here on stage and online, Camino Kavanagh, expert and research fellow from UNIDIR, Steinar Bjornstad, strategic competence and research manager at Tampnet, Avi Staube, member of the management board from the Latvia State Radio and Television Center, Sandra Maximiano, chair of the board of directors of ANACOM, and Kent Bressi, who is joining us online, legal advisor for International Cable Protection Committee. Please join me in a round of applause to welcome our speakers on stage. So we have structured this as a conversation. We have some questions that we have prepared for our experts. If there will be time towards the end of the session, and if you would like to intervene, please do let me know. But I can't make many promises because we have to finish at 1 p.m. sharp. So Steiner, I'd like to start with you. From an operator's perspective, how do you integrate resilience into the design and management of subsea cable infrastructure, both technically and strategically, in high-risk regions like the North Sea?
Very good question. So at Tampnet, we are an offshore telecom service provider, and these type of services is really important these days because it's also important for oil and gas. So we have a very critical infrastructure. It's both mobile, it's satellite, and it's fixed links. And the thing is, it all depends on the optical subsea fiber cables. So they are really, really important for the services. And the capacity of these cables, it's enormous, and it's carrying a lot of traffic, and also for data centers out of Norway. So how to protect these cables? How to enable resilience? The thing is that you need to be able to do this already in the planning. So we have multiple cables, that's the first thing. And if something goes wrong, we need to repair it quite fast. So we are a member of an alliance, so ensuring that we can have repair within a couple of weeks if something goes wrong. Also, because it's very high capacity, it's not that easy to switch this traffic electronically if something goes wrong from one cable to another. But we use optical switching. And even offshore, we have optical switching. So we actually switch the light in the optical fiber cables. And by doing this, we are able to protect very quickly, put the traffic over to another cable if one cable fails by some reason. So I think that is maybe the key things that we are doing for protecting the traffic.
Thank you. Camino, I'd like to come to you now. And we've heard now, but even in the previous part of the panel, how different regions are potentially experiencing slightly different considerations when it comes to the threat landscape. But building on the work that you've done, and if I'd ask you to zoom out and consider a little bit more what is the broader kind of global picture, how is the threat landscape for subsea cable infrastructure evolving across different regions, and what are some of the key challenges that you have identified?
Thanks, Giacomo, and thank you for the invitation to speak here. It's a real honor to be on this panel with the other panelists. So I think I'll zoom back in and then zoom out again. What I found interesting from the minister from Estonia, she mentioned the 1884 convention. And what's very interesting in some of the research I've been doing on damage to subsea cables, if we're just looking at the submersed element of submarine cables or subsea cables, was back in 1881, already a group of countries concerned about damage to cables in the North Sea raised the issue in the pre-negotiations to the 1884 convention. In 1882, a specific government brought statistics to the negotiations of the Paris Conference and highlighted that 60% of damage to cables was caused by natural events, 35% by unintentional acts due to accidents at sea or force majeure, and 5% due to gross negligence and some malign activities. And I think within that, malign activities would have been very minimal. But that was in the build-up to World War I, and as we know, during that period as well, state-backed interventions or damage, sabotage, espionage, etc., was increasing and was being introduced into battle planning. Let's move forward a century plus, I think 143 years later, and those statistics wouldn't have changed very much, although I think maybe the stats between natural causes and unintentional damage caused by accidents and so forth would slightly change in that sense. The number of accidents caused by intentional damage, the stats, it's very hard to know because, as we know, it's very hard to ascertain responsibility for some of the incidents. But we do know that it's a great concern for states. And particularly in the European context, since Nord Stream, we know that it's not just a concern with regard to states in this region, but also in the Baltic Sea, the Irish Sea, the North Atlantic, and so forth. But that differs significantly across regions, as was mentioned by Minister Tijani as well. Different regions are experiencing very, very different problems. So that call for coordination, especially coordination from a regulatory perspective, from an operational perspective, is very difficult when your problem set is also very different. So reaching some kind of alignment there is absolutely key. And absolutely key is also engagement with industry. But I'm not going to go too far into that because I understand there are others that will talk about that problem.
Thank you, Camino, for this at least first stab at the problem. And I think it's interesting because statistics are normally built on the data we have, right? And it's always hard. It is hard in the cyber domain, and it's probably just as hard in the specific context of subsea cables to really have strong data on malicious or malign activities because we only hear of the successful attempts. What we don't know is how much of the malicious activity that threatens or targets subsea cable infrastructure isn't successful, and that probably if we had more visibility into that, we could do something even more. But I'd like now to give the floor to you, Evis, and your organization has, speaking of incidents, has recently experienced the direct impact of a subsea cable incident. Could you walk us through what happened and the immediate actions that were taken to respond to the disruption of service, please?
Yeah. Some say that the cut cable or unplugged cable is the best way to protect against cyber threats. Just the unfortunate side effect is the loss of communication. But jokes aside, but my big pleasure to be here and to tell the story. About the incidents on subsea cables, of course, especially last few years or especially last couple of years, the incidents, especially in this area, Baltic Sea, North Sea, has dramatically increased. Like in a normal life, before the politics changed, the incidents happened time by time. That's not any news. The fishing nets, etc. But the big incidents in numbers has significantly increased. So also our company has been prepared. So we had the plans before. We had the drills, procedures, table exercises, algorithms, etc., spare parts. But when the incident happens, basically everything becomes crystal clear. So not loss of communication. Our company's customers, end users immediately feel it. Talking about the impact of the incident, there basically are. Let's simplify the networking. So basically, there are two parts. One part is the public internet, and thanks to the great design of internet, we can say heals itself. So it rebalances, and the public normal users don't feel it. And there is other part, like let's call them enterprise or data center to data center, connecting A to B. Those guys usually they should have a second, third, or fourth route. If one breaks, everything switches over, like my colleague explained. So about the first part, as far as we know, nobody felt the impact because the capacity of the connections is very huge, and just losing one cable or one cable connection, normal public don't feel it. Of course, we were speculating that there might be some minor examples. For example, somebody was doing the stock exchange trading where the latency is critical. Maybe somebody lost some, we don't know that. Maybe somebody lost a game in Counter-Strike or something like that, where latency is important. Talking about the latency, so our cable is connecting Latvia, Sweden, so very important in terms of latency. When we lost the connection, the latency increased 5 to 10 times because the speed of light is constant, and then we cannot fight physics in that sense. But otherwise, everything continued to work. How we fixed the thing? So, said we need to fix it as soon as possible, but it really depends on preparation. Do we have right spares? Do we have right spare cable, the right joints? Do we have the vessel standby agreement? Do we have right weather? The waves shouldn't be higher than 2 meters, for example, for special vessels. So in our incident, we tried 3 times to recover. The 3rd time was successful, and despite of February being a short month, we managed to fix it within a month, so 28 days, which is a good result in a winter storms. So all in all, we really had a good lesson. You cannot compare that practical lesson to the table exercise, and we learned a lot from it.
Thank you. Also for bringing to light some very concrete examples of the sort of incidents that can occur, but also the 28 days is a remarkable result, but it shows that it's not something that can be fixed overnight. So it does really require adequate planning and adequate resourcing. Otherwise, 28 days can then be even extended even further. I'd like now to come to you, Sandra, and given the strategic location and tradition, Portugal is a very relevant player in the submarine cable industry. And through your work with ANACOM, the National Regulatory Authority for Communications in Portugal, and more recently with the ITU Advisory Body for Submarine Cable Resilience, what practices do you recognize as being most effective for strengthening subsea cable protection at the national level as well as across jurisdictions?
First of all, thanks a lot for the invitation. It's really a great honor to be here and talking about this so important topic. First, I would also like to tell you that Portugal geography places us at the crossroads of global connectivity. We have one of the largest exclusive economic zones in the world and a long tradition of cable landings. Portugal is uniquely positioned to strengthen its role in the field. So in fact, submarine cables already link us directly to multiple continents. Also, we have 2 autonomous regions, Madeira and Açores, which are composed by islands, and they depend almost entirely on submarine cable for communication. So that makes us also having this privileged position, but comes with special responsibilities for ensuring the resilience of submarine cable systems. So we truly believe in 4, I would say, key aspects. First, to build redundancy and route diversity. Second, strategic preparation and predictive maintenance. And third, protection zones, so building these protection zones and promote rapid repair capacity. So after all, we cannot prevent every incident. Submarine cable faults are inevitable, as it has been said here, whether from natural causes, cheap anchors, or even geopolitical tensions. But what matters is preparation and rapid response. And that's why resilience must be built by design and not improvised in crisis. So that's our big principle. So first, the planning and implementation of undersea cable networks should promote redundancy as a crucial strategy for enhancing security and resilience, ensuring continuity of service in case of disruptions. And this would probably involve, I would say, 4 important points. Establish multiple geographical diverse cable routes and a mesh network architecture that enables dynamic rerouting in case of localized disruptions. Deploying alternative routes, including satellite backups and terrestrial connections. Avoiding strategic choke points to minimize congestion and high-risk areas, which are more susceptible to sabotage or accidents. And deploying armored cables and burying cables deeper in higher risk areas. So this will be 4 important points for planning and building redundancy. Second, I'll mention strategic preparation, which includes building intelligence into our networks so they can adapt in real time. Technologies like software-defined networking and AI analytics allow dynamic rerouting and predictive detection. This agility reduces downtime and boosts resilience. Third, we need collective mechanisms to support repair capacity, especially for regions and countries that lack those resources to respond on their own. This is particularly important for island states and remote regions. And at last, we need to promote rapid repair, and it's really important. For that, we need licensing and permitting procedures that should be simplified and more flexible. And of course, promote investment in repair vessels and joint capacity. These priorities cannot be postponed. Equally important is having clear plans for incident response, setting strict deadlines for repairs, and establishing priorities levels so that in case of multiple simultaneous failures, the most critical links, those essential for national security and public welfare, are restored first. So it's very important to know which critical infrastructures are in every country so we can establish these priorities. We are also at a time when technological innovation, particularly artificial intelligence, is reshaping the landscape. The training and deployment of large AI models demand massive computational capacity, as we know, and energy-intensive data centers, which in turn depend on robust, high-capacity connectivity, also submarine cables. This is not just about speed, but about enabling an entirely new digital paradigm. ANACOM is actively monitoring these trends to ensure that our regulatory framework anticipates infrastructure bottlenecks and ensures sustainable high-capacity connectivity. So in a very high-speed, I would say, technological change environment, we need regulation to keep the same pace, and that's why, and that's what ANACOM is investing nowadays, to keep the same pace as innovation goes, to have a proper regulatory framework that can enable the redundancy and resilience submarine cables.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your kind of initial overview of some key topics. Again, building on the idea that resilience is intentional. It's not something that can be responsive to the need. The issue of preparedness and the issue of regulation, which are very important. Kent, thank you so much for patiently waiting online. It is a pleasure to see you on the screen. We've heard now and before the importance of public-private partnerships when it comes to the protection of subsea cables. And through your work at ICPC, you engage substantially with both governments and industry. So from your perspective, what are the most effective ways to strengthen public-private partnership in responding to cable-related threats?
Thank you, Giacomo, for allowing me to participate remotely. I am actually currently on holiday in Greece before I teach oceans law as part of the Rhodes Academy of Oceans Law and Policy, which runs each year here in Greece. And it's also nice to see my fellow panelists. To your question, more than anything else, we need more and better awareness and communication between and among submarine cable operators other marine industries and governments at the national, regional, and multilateral levels. These are never-ending tasks. They are not one-time things, but we really see a need for ongoing dialogue among these stakeholders at all levels. In particular, governments need to understand what industry already does to promote cable protection and resilience in the design and operation of systems, and also to recognize those actions that governments are uniquely positioned to take, particularly with political and military responses to intentional damage. In some cases, industry and governments have shared tasks. We also need better understanding of risks and threats to cables. The ICPC in particular has a lot of very good data on that, but I'm not sure that it's always recognized or understood. We also need to understand the interrelationships between unintentional and intentional sources of damage, and the fact that the cause of damage is not always immediately known. In the design and development phase, submarine cable operators embed cable protection and system design by selecting routes and landings that balance connectivity needs with risk mitigation and geographic diversity, which Sandra and others today have taken note of, all of which strengthens resilience. In the operating phase, with other marine stakeholders and to publicize the locations of cables, which I'll return to in a second, as that's become increasingly fraught. Governments don't need to dictate or duplicate those particular actions, but again, there are some actions that only governments can take. And the ICPC launched in 2021 its best practices for governments for cable protection and resilience to highlight the ICPC's own thinking about this. And in particular, the best practices advocate for a holistic approach to risks that minimizes infrastructure damage and promotes continuity of communication, even in the event that there is infrastructure damage. So the best practices are not a lengthy document. They were meant to be very user-friendly, about 12 pages long, and have some very specific best practices highlighted, including the use of default separation distances between cables and other marine activities, as other uncoordinated marine industries, whether it's wind farms, oil and gas development, deep seabed mining, vessel anchorages or fishing can damage cables. Having a single point of contact within national governments adoption of cable protection laws and measures and implementation of them, minimization of cabotage and crewing restrictions, customs duties, taxes, and fees, as this is very much a maritime. Classification of submarine cables as critical infrastructure in order to secure government resources for protection. This is the subject of a forthcoming study that Camino is publishing. The sharing of risk and threat information between governments and industries we have seen with recent cable damage incidents in the Baltic and the Arctic. There's still a lot of work to be done there, but so far I think that a lot of government engagement with the industry and responses so far have been very productive. The use of technology such as fiber sensing is also very promising. And then ratification and implementation of the Law of the Sea Convention and the 1884 Convention, both of which establish rights and responsibilities for states, including some key tools that relate to cable security. So a lot of these best practices were later incorporated into the New York Statement. Many of them were echoed by Sandra, our previous panelist speaker. So I'll just finally note that it's important for governments to understand how their own policies and regulations can potentially undermine cable protection and resilience, because we're very concerned about this as an industry. and our best practices also address this. In some jurisdictions, we see national security-oriented regulation creating massive delays for installation and repair permits. And this ultimately undermines development of additional and diverse systems that promote that resilience and allow recovery of damaged systems. We see that regulations oftentimes encourage clustering of cables and landings in narrow corridors to get cables out of the way of offshore energy development or fishing, and that can magnify the risk that a single event will damage multiple cables and disrupt connectivity. And finally, we see a renewed push by some governments to remove cables from nautical charts. We think that this is woefully misguided, given that approximately 70% of cable damage each year is caused by fishing and anchors. Removing cables from nautical charts would significantly increase those risks and make it impossible for cable owners to pursue damages claims because no one would know where the cables are. So ultimately, I don't think that we need elaborate new regulatory constructs or the like to encourage engagement between governments and industry. But we do need to leverage existing agreements, data, and tools to promote cable resilience, protection, and security, and inform laws, policies, and coordinating mechanisms.
Thank you, Kent, for sharing your first remarks with us. And having served 15 years in the Navy, the thought of having subsea infrastructure that is not on nautical charts is terrifying in more than one way. But thank you also for bringing to light the best practices that ICPC has developed, that I do invite everyone that is interested in consulting. But also for, you opened by stressing the need for continuous dialogue among the different stakeholder groups. And I think this is key, this is what we're trying to do, but of course, in an hour and a half, we can only scratch the surface. There is much more that needs to be done on a continuous basis, even for the simple reason that people change and rotate, particularly in government. You may have a very fruitful dialogue today, and in 6 months, your counterparts have rotated and have gone to other posts and other jobs. And it is important that this dialogue, that there is a mechanism to really make sure that this dialogue is continuous. I'd like to go back to our panel for a second round of questions, and coming back to you, Elvis, about the incident that you described earlier. And so following the cable disruption, how did your organization coordinate with national authorities, international partners, and any other stakeholder was relevant? And what are some of the key lessons that emerged about effective collaboration and communication?
Yeah, I would call it different communication channels. And first of all, the very important, and not only about like any subsea cable incidents, like any big incidents, we call it like crisis management within a company. So the team should be, like core team of crisis management should be very precise, should be trained, shouldn't be bigger than needed. Everybody has to know exactly what to do. And that's also a question of training, as I mentioned, the table exercises. Second is communication with partners, and here we are touching different stakeholders. It includes authorities, it includes international partners, because like any subsea cable, in most of the cases, is connecting countries, right? So you're connecting one country to another, in our case, Latvia, Sweden. You should know somebody on the other end, right? So in our case, we have the like established communication line. I'm not talking about cable communication, but about human communication line connecting two NOCs 24/7. So you always have, like within a minute or seconds, you know to whom to talk to, right? And that also should be like documented in the best case, trained, practiced, etc. And then the third part is public communication. The public communication also is very important, and you shouldn't be like silent after the incident for days. In our case, we had like prepared and like we call it routine press releases daily. You shouldn't open too much information, because in many cases that's kind of sensitive information, right? What happened in which place, but you shouldn't also be totally silent. So you should really feel and feel the balance, what to disclose, what don't disclose, and that's also very critical. About the communication with different parties involved, it includes already in subsea cable cases. It includes, of course, the Navy, the military side. Those algorithms and procedures also have to be established before any incidents to be in place. And it also requires training, requires preparation. It should be also algorithms written on a paper, trained, drilled, etc. So it's all about preparation. And then in a practice, in a worst case, of course, when the incident happens, you can try it in a real life. And there are lessons always. So like any preparation, any plans, who said it? Truman said that any plans go to waste, but the most important is to do the plans.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. And we'll come back to this plan and prepare issue later. But and I would like to come back to you, Steiner, about we've heard already how it is important to be able to respond as quickly as possible to minimize disruption. So my question to you is, from a technological standpoint, what are some of the emerging tools or innovations that you see as most promising for detecting, mitigating, or responding to threats to subsea cables?
Yeah, and the answer, I think, is actually to combine a lot of tools, to monitor, combining several tools, getting a lot of data. And I think I would like to tell a story, how this started. It started with trawlers, probably. We didn't actually know. It was cable cuts. And what was it? We just noticed the light went off, and what happened? And then first tool that came at hand was AIS information. That is GPS information sent from vessels, also containing some information about their activity, like, for example, trawling. And by actively monitoring the activity around our cables, we now have a knowledge of what is going on, which vessels are moving around these cables. But that is on the surface, not underwater, not subsea. And some of these vessels, they just turn off their AIS information. Mm-hmm. So it's still challenging. And then we started exploring fiber sensing. Fiber sensing actually means that the fiber works as a microphone or an array of microphones. So we can listen underwater to what is going on. By doing this, we are able to see and listen if a trawler is approaching, and we can see it like 2 kilometers away. So we actually see the subsea activity. And that really enables us to take action very early. But the thing is that trawlers, they are crossing the cable like 10 times every day. It can be as much as that. So what we actually need to know is also if the cable is hit, because normally this is okay to pass over the cable because it's buried, and it should be well buried, protected. But we can't control the environment, and there are water currents that may make the cable exposed. So we use a different fiber sensing technology that now also gives us statistics on small hits. And by doing this, we can also see where the cable may be vulnerable. So combining all these technologies, we know where the cable may be vulnerable, if there is something approaching these vulnerable points, and also statistics on what is going on over the cable, what type of vessels are crossing. So today, most of our network is actually covered with fiber sensing techniques, and we have quite a good overview of what is going on.
So I would say that, would you say that situational awareness, if you want, has improved significantly in recent years thanks to technological innovations? Yeah? Okay, good. Thank you for that. And Camino, I'd like to come back to you and building on the insights shared by panelists as well as drawing from your own research with UNIDIR, what are some additional either policy or technical approaches that you've seen states and other stakeholders exploring to strengthen the protection and resilience of subsea cables?
Okay, so basically what we did in the research, we broke government approaches down into 3 different areas. So how government actions, whether it be policy, regulatory, or operational activity, how it contributes to the actual resilience capacities of the systems themselves. So we looked at the absorptive capacities, which would be the kind of preparedness, ensuring all the procedures and protocols, the regulation and so forth, including many of the best practices that Kent mentioned, and that they are in place. In the event that something happens. And now the systems are actually built bearing in mind that something will eventually happen, whether it be regardless of the cause. So the second area that we looked at was the responsive capacities of the system. So what are governments doing to actually prepare and support some of the responses required. And I think Sandra mentioned issues related to repair capabilities and capacities. I think the previous panel discussed workforce challenges and so forth. Industry has a significant focus on workforce at the moment, trying to attract young talent into the industry. But it's difficult. Also, governments need to do the same. And we also have to bear in mind that there are some very small governments, small countries that have limited capacities and that have limited resources. So being able to invest in DAS and so forth is a luxury, and one also has to bear in mind that it also has jurisdictional complications. So there are lots of challenges on that front. Also within the restorative capacities, we are seeing that a number of states are actually looking, are investing in market analysis and so forth to see where it would be best, better, where the better use of their resources would lie and so forth. There are a range of other issues there in that rubric that we touched upon, which I can come back to. The final tranche that we looked at, or the final area, was in adaptive capacities, and we also often forget about those, but I think colleagues here have also talked about learning from incidents, regardless of the cause again. What can we learn from those, and how do we adapt? How do we adapt our national structures, procedures, regulation, and so forth, to be able to prepare and respond to incidents should they happen. And a final thing that cuts across these different areas is that we've been talking mainly about the submersed as a part of a subsea cable system. We've touched upon it slightly, but there's also the network layer, there's the supply chain issues, a range of other issues. There's the repair fleet, the store, the supplies, and so forth. So there are a range of different areas, and I think connecting these both through government action in our crisis management, emergency planning, and so forth is absolutely critical. And I don't think any government is there yet. So how you bring together all of those elements, but with working in conjunction with industry as well as academia is absolutely fundamental. Thank you.
Thank you, Camino. Sandra, I'd like to come back to you with a follow-up question on, given also your role within the advisory body on submarine cable resilience, how do you see international initiatives such as this one and foster better cooperation and strengthen the resilience of subsea cable infrastructure?
So that's one of the main purposes of the advisory body for submarine cable resilience. and that is one main purpose, because definitely collaboration is vital in this case. So to enhance connectivity, to stimulate innovation and promote resilience of submarine cables, and if you look at all these, they are multifaceted tasks, and they require collaboration, so across different organizations. So we need governments, we need industry, we need academia and international organizations to work together. So over the past year, ANACOM has deepened our partnerships, recognizing that each player plays a unique role. For instance, governments and regulators create enabling frameworks, as I also mentioned before. Academia advances research and innovation, it's extremely important. Industry builds and operates vital critical infrastructure. So we need all to work together. And having said this, the challenge is in ensuring that these diverse players speak the same language, and sometimes very difficult, because of course all of these players, they have their own interests. They maximize, now speaking like an economist, maximize their own utility and interests, but we need to align their efforts toward a common goal. And the advisory body is an example, is a multi-stakeholder forum where we try to do that. So we try to have all these organizations together and working together and trying to align our language for this common goal. So at ANACOM, we see this as first-hand, and we are very actively fostering an ecosystem that encourages investment in submarine cables and associated infrastructure. We remain committed in leading this agenda at both European and international levels. At European level, we do it mainly through BEREC, the body of European regulators for electronic communications, and in collaboration with the European Commission. In BEREC, for example, ANACOM is the co-leader of the BEREC report on domestic submarine cables in different member states, together with a national regulatory authority from France, ARCEP. We are also very active at European Union Agency for Cybersecurity, and this is an important topic there as well. And finally, as mentioned, I'm very proud to co-chair the International Advisory Group for Submarine Cable Resilience, which, as I mentioned, provides a unique global platform for collaboration. So the International Advisory Body, for some that maybe are still not familiar, was launched by the International Telecommunication Union in partnership with the International Cable Protection Committee, ICPC. And this partnership is a significant and fortunate development, combining the ITU's capacity to promote worldwide dialogue on digital matters with ICPC's expertise in submarine cable resilience, which I believe to be a very fortunate and needed collaboration. In addition, 40 outstanding personalities from both the public and private sectors across the world are part of the advisory body. So this ensures a diverse knowledge and experience, including contribution from countries ranging from large economies to small island states. So this diversity is extremely important. The role of the advisory body is to promote these open conversations, build trust for the benefit of global community. And we aim at ensuring that the discussions are based on technical merit and best practice. I think in my personal view as well, I think we should give special attention to regions, countries, and remote islands where economic incentives for prompt response mechanisms are lower. But of course, their response is important for everyone. So the incentives are there. So we should work in collaboration to increase the response capacity of this small stage. The advisory body has made very decisive progress. In particular, I would like to mention in February in Abuja, Nigeria, the International Submarine Cable Resilience Summit, and the body approved the Abuja Declaration, making a key milestone for submarine cable resilience and paving the way for greater international cooperation. Secondly, the body established clear priorities for 2025-26, and decided to form 3 thematic working groups responsible for deliverable concrete outcomes. These groups will address submarine cable resilience from multiple complementary perspectives. One of the working groups will focus on resilience by design, examining the importance of ensuring service continuity through redundant and diverse communication routes. Another working group will focus on timely deployment and repairing of submarine cable systems, exploring how regulatory measures can expedite this process. And the third working group will be dedicated to risk identification, monitoring, and mitigation. So with this framework, we'll assess the application of new technologies and monitoring systems. So I think it's, as I said, it's composed by experts from different regions and stakeholders. And given the progress that we made so far, I'm totally confident that the advisory body will remain committed to ensuring the submarine cables are safe and resilient. So just to conclude, preparing for the future, and especially in this matter, it's not a task of one individual body. We must work together, and we share responsibility among regulators, industry, academia, and international communities. So we should cooperate openly, pragmatically, and globally in this case.
Thank you, Sandra. Kent, I'd like to come back to you for a last question. Now, with growing international attention to subsea infrastructure protection, how can new initiative complement and avoid duplicating existing efforts like those led by ICPC and others?
Thank you, Giacomo. Well, first, I'd like to start just by noting that I think Sandra laid out very clearly the amazing collaboration that we have between the ITU and the ICPC under her leadership and that of Ozan Tijani, who was on our prior panel. And I think that can be a model for leveraging the industry expertise and experience of the ICPC without duplicating it. But I think it's also important to understand, Sandra is very generous in describing and helpful in describing the advisory body, but I'm not sure that everyone is has a good understanding of what the ICPC does either. So I thought I'd note just briefly that the ICPC was founded in 1958, and it's the world's leading organization promoting submarine cable protection and resilience. It's an NGO that works with its members, governments, international organizations, other marine industries, and the scientific community on a number of key tasks. First, to identify and mitigate risks of natural and human damage to cables. The ICPC has developed the world's leading databases of cable damage information and also repair timeframes, which are key inputs for the work of the advisory body. The ICPC has developed recommendations and the best practices for governments that I mentioned earlier for the entire cable project lifecycle. The ICPC promotes scientific research regarding cables in the marine environment. This is even more critical in light of the BBNJ agreement under the Law of the Sea Convention. And the ICPC just published in partnership with the United Nations Environment Program World Climate Monitoring Center a report titled Submarine Cables and Marine Biodiversity, which we had very much promoted and provided resources for as a resource for governments as they implement the BBNJ agreement. We also work to promote, and this is particularly my task, the rule of law for the oceans, particularly ratification and implementation of the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea, and also, as Camino was mentioning, the 1884 Cable Protection Convention, on which there is renewed focus. So the ICPC has more than 240 members from approximately 75 countries. Those are industry representatives, but the ICPC also has about 20 government observers, and we welcome more formal government observers, but also engagement even for those governments who are not observers. So we see, as I noted before, a need for continuing engagement and communication. And this is not just with between the ICPC and governments and other marine stakeholders, but also the regional cable protection committees that focus on more localized issues around the world. These aren't formally subsidiaries of the ICPC, but we coordinate closely with them to avoid duplication of work. And we have regional cable protection committees that are very active in Submarine Cables Association, the North American Submarine Cable Association, recently established committees in Africa, and the Oceanic Submarine Cable Association. We do not have regional cable protection committees in that area. The ICPC and these other organizations are all keen to work with governments on a range of initiatives and don't view the recommendations and principles as that they advance in a proprietary fashion. As I noted before, the fact that the New York statement included recommendations that the ICPC had previously articulated was very flattering, but we would like to see greater adoption by more and more bodies of that. So other ICPC recent engagements, obviously the International Advisory Body is a key focus for us. I serve as a co-executive secretary, and we're grateful for the leadership of our co-chairs who are with us today. We held a critical law of the sea workshop for our members and regional academics in Singapore last year with the support of the Australian and Singapore governments, looking at key issues with the BBNJ agreement, regulatory and permitting issues, and security, among others. We have worked with the UNODC to develop cable resilience plans in the Indian Ocean region. And it's a really interesting and helpful model, I think, for a lot of countries in considering how to bring together stakeholders to think in a more integrated way about connectivity and cable protection. And then I serve on the International Law Association's Committee on Submarine Cables and Pipelines, which is developing guidelines to address prevention, monitoring, and responses under international law to intentional cable damage. As I noted before, we're unlikely to get a new treaty addressing some of these issues, but the ICPC's view is that countries have existing tools under international law that they can and should use, and we certainly point to the government of Finland as having made good use of those tools. So finally, there's a need for better communication and coordination on issues in multilateral processes. So these aren't just sort of looking at best practices initiatives, but also looking at collaborating on some critical issues and other fora globally. These include work in the International Seabed Authority to ensure cable protection and resilience in relation to deep sea mining, which is increasingly an issue given the push for critical minerals and development of green technologies. The impact of the new BBNJ agreement on cable routing and permitting, and cable damage by dark fleet ships, which we remain concerned is something that the international community, including the IMO, has not yet been able to address effectively. So in general, I think we have the data analysis recommendations and potential legal tools that we need, and which shouldn't necessarily be duplicated, but we need much better and more comprehensive global implementation. Thank you.
Thank you, Kent. We have just a couple of minutes before we have to wrap up this panel. So before I share with you some concluding remarks from my notes, I just wanted to give the panelists literally 20 to 30 seconds maximum if there is one key takeaway that you would like the audience to walk away after this hour and a half discussing subsea cables. What would that be? You can only add to whatever the other person has said. So starting with you, Camino.
Prepare and exercise your preparedness.
Thank you.
Be prepared, monitor what is going on, situational awareness.
I would mention again these DAS systems which were mentioned. So every cable, existing cable, is a big asset, and we can call it a big sensor. If we install, already installed, also on the new cables, distributed or centralized, whatever, integrated system of such a sensors in a particular area, for example, Baltic Sea, which is very compact sea, some call it Baltic Lake, as a test bed, and that would give a big benefit, not only protecting the cables, but to understand what is going on under the water. There is a shadow fleet, there is normal fleet, there is other fleet, but nobody knows what's happening. If shadow fleet switches off the AAS system, it goes invisible. With such a sensors, we can immediately see something better.
Thank you. Sandra?
And as I said, I think collaboration is the key. We need, this is a very important matter. It's a multi-stakeholder issue, and it should be, we should work together. And as I said, involve everyone, governments, academia, regulators, international organizations, and increase awareness, and of course work on the best practices. I think booklets of best practices to act are very important, and especially some countries are at a different speed, but into this issue we should all try to align the speed that we move on, because as I said, like small states, remote islands, they can't be left alone, because it will have a negative impact for all of us.
Thank you. Kent, any final thoughts on your side?
Yes, convene and communicate with stakeholders. The oceans are really busy, complicated places.
Thank you. Very quickly, because time is up, what I took away from this hour and a half is the following: that really strengthening the resilience of subsea cable is a team sport. Is a team sport that requires different players knowing exactly what to do and working together as a team. No individual player can really achieve this ambitious goal without working with others. But also that resilience has different components. One is protection. Protection is key, but is necessary, but is not sufficient. It has to be matched with adequate planning, because no matter how well we protect our cables, incidents are going to happen, and it's important to have plans that are well thought in advance. So resilience cannot be improvised. It has to be made by design through careful planning. But while planning is essential, plans are useless unless they are put in practice through concrete measures of preparedness, which include dialogue and discussions and cooperation between states, between public and private cooperation. And these cooperation needs to be tested through exercises, through crisis management drills that really bring to the surface all of the possible mechanisms that need to be improved. Because ultimately, the last important pillar is the pillar of response that needs to be effective and needs to be quick in order to minimize disruption and make sure that we work towards resilience, redundancy, and ultimately continuity of service. With that, I hope the summary kind of does not do justice to an hour and a half in discussion, but hopefully it touches on the key points. And we're out of time. I do invite you to approach our speakers and experts after the session if you would like to ask more questions. All is left for me to do is to thank you, the audience, for engaging or for being here in person and online. The government of Norway, not only for being amazing hosts, but also for partnering with UNIDIR in organizing this session. And of course, last but not least, to our excellent experts and speakers that took their time to share their knowledge with us. So please join me in a round of applause for our speakers. Thank you.